Vanessa Cole stepped out of her sleek black SUV, adjusting her designer trench coat as the crisp autumn air brushed against her skin. The Oakridge Grand Hotel stood before her, a towering symbol of old money and exclusivity, its golden lights illuminating the grand entrance. It was the kind of place where business deals were sealed over champagne and whispers of power echoed through the halls. She had booked a suite under her name weeks in advance, expecting nothing less than the premium service the hotel was known for. Her schedule had been relentless. Meetings, conferences, and a multi-million-dollar deal finalized just hours ago. Now, all she wanted was a hot bath, a glass of wine, and a quiet night before flying home in the morning. As she approached the front desk, Vanessa noticed the way the receptionist, a young blonde woman with a stiff smile, barely looked up. The woman was engaged in casual conversation with another guest, a well-dressed older man who was clearly a regular. Vanessa cleared her throat softly. The receptionist, Lisa, glanced at her, her smile fading slightly. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice lacking the warmth she had just used with the other guest. Vanessa nodded, pulling her phone from her bag. "Yes, I have a reservation. Vanessa Cole, a corner suite." Lisa's fingers moved across the keyboard as she typed in the name. Her eyes scanned the screen for a moment before her expression shifted. I'm sorry, but I don't see a reservation under that name." Vanessa's brow furrowed. She had personally received the confirmation email. "That's strange. I have my confirmation right here." She turned her phone screen toward Lisa, showing the hotel's own email with the date and booking number. Lisa hesitated before offering a tight-lipped smile. "I'm afraid we're fully booked for the evening." A flicker of irritation passed through Vanessa, but she kept her tone calm. "You just checked someone in a minute ago." Lisa's gaze flickered toward the manager standing nearby. He was an older man, mid-50s, his salt and pepper hair neatly combed back, his tailored suit immaculate. Mr. Whitmore, the name tag on his lapel, read. He had been watching the exchange with an impassive expression, but now he stepped forward, his presence heavy with unspoken authority. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his tone clipped. Vanessa turned to him. "Yes, I have a confirmed reservation, but I'm being told there are no rooms available." Whitmore gave a practiced smile, the kind that was meant to be polite, but carried an undercurrent of dismissal. He didn't even glance at the phone screen Vanessa was holding up. "I'm sorry, miss." He glanced at her as if seeing her for the first time. "Cole, is it?" She nodded, waiting. Whitmore's expression didn't change. "Unfortunately, we reserve the right to refuse service at our discretion." The words were spoken smoothly, but the meaning was clear. Vanessa took a slow breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle over her. She had seen this before, subtle, yet unmistakable. It wasn't about the reservation. It wasn't about availability. It was about her. She could have pushed back. She could have called for the corporate office, made a scene, forced their hand, but something in her told her to hold back, to watch, to remember. She gave a small, knowing smile and slipped her phone back into her bag. "I see," she said simply. Whitmore raised an eyebrow as if expecting her to argue. When she didn't, his expression flickered with something smug, as though he had won some unspoken battle. Without another word, Vanessa turned and walked away. Lisa let out a small breath of relief. Whitmore adjusted his tie and returned to the back office, already forgetting about the woman they had just turned away. But they had made one fatal mistake. They had underestimated Vanessa Cole, and by morning, everything was about to change. Vanessa Cole sat in the back of her black SUV, the city lights flickering through the tinted windows as she scrolled through her emails. The cold rejection at Oakridge Grand still lingered in her mind, but not as anger. She had learned long ago that emotion alone wouldn't change the world. Strategy, however, would. She took a slow breath, then pressed a button on her phone. Within seconds, her assistant, Jordan Price, picked up. "Vanessa, I wasn't expecting your call this late." Vanessa smiled slightly. "Change of plans. I need you to run a financial report on Oakridge Grand." There was a pause. "The hotel? Why?" "I want to know who owns it, what their profit margins look like, and whether they're open to selling." Jordan was silent for half a beat before letting out a small chuckle. "Let me guess, they turned you away." Vanessa's smile widened. Jordan had worked with her long enough to recognize the look in her eye, even when he wasn't there to see it. "They did," she confirmed, "and I have a feeling they can't afford to be so picky." I'll pull the numbers now. Give me an hour. Vanessa ended the call and leaned back in her seat, her fingers drumming lightly on her knee. She had spent years in the real estate industry, acquiring and revamping properties that others thought were beyond saving. She didn't just buy buildings, she transformed them. If Oakridge Grand had been the thriving empire it pretended to be, it wouldn't have needed to rely on exclusion to maintain its image. Places that operated that way were often hiding something: financial troubles, management issues, or outdated business models that couldn't keep up with the modern world. By the time Vanessa arrived at her penthouse, a full financial report was waiting in her inbox. She poured herself a glass of wine and settled into her plush leather chair, skimming through the numbers with sharp, calculating eyes. And just as she suspected, Oakridge Grand wasn't as stable as it seemed. On the surface, the hotel had a reputation for exclusivity, catering to the city's wealthiest guests, but a deeper dive into its records painted a different picture. Revenue was declining. Bookings had dropped nearly 20% over the last 2 years. Their clientele was aging, with fewer young business elites choosing to stay there. The hotel had also taken out a series of high-interest loans to fund maintenance costs, meaning they were operating on borrowed time. Most importantly, the current owners were quietly looking for a way out. Vanessa's lips curled into a knowing smile. The next morning, Vanessa met with her investment team in a private boardroom overlooking the city. Jordan had already forwarded the financials to everyone at the table, and they wasted no time getting to the point. The owners are in a tight spot, Jordan explained. They've been trying to find a buyer for months, but no one's biting at their asking price. Vanessa nodded. Then they'll be very interested in my offer. Her CFO, a middle-aged woman named Camilla Hart, folded her hands on the table. You could get the hotel for less than market value if you negotiate right. Vanessa sipped her coffee, considering, I don't just want to buy it, I want to rebuild it. New leadership, new branding, new policies. Jordan smirked. Starting with a front desk that actually lets guests check in? Vanessa chuckled. That would be a good start. By the end of the meeting, the strategy was set. A discreet offer would be made through one of Vanessa's holding companies to avoid alerting the hotel's staff. If the owners were as desperate as they seemed, the deal would close fast. And when it did, Vanessa wouldn't just be checking into the Oakridge Grand, she would be owning it. Vanessa Cole didn't waste time. Within 48 hours, her legal team had reached out to the owners of Oakridge Grand through a shell company, keeping her name off the deal. She wanted to see just how eager they were to sell without tipping them off to who was buying. The response came back almost immediately. They were interested. Oakridge Grand was owned by a private group called Sterling Hospitality, a small but once prestigious hotel management firm. A decade ago, their properties had been in high demand, but as the travel industry evolved, they failed to adapt. Their focus on exclusivity had alienated younger, high-spending travelers, and their unwillingness to modernize left them behind competitors who embraced innovation. The cracks in their empire were showing, and Oakridge Grand was their biggest liability. Vanessa's team discovered that the hotel's loans were stacking up, and Sterling Hospitality had been searching for a buyer for months. They had turned down previous offers because they were still clinging to an unrealistic valuation, hoping someone would come along and pay top dollar. Vanessa wasn't about to do that. She knew the game. When a seller was desperate, patience was power. Her financial advisors submitted an offer, far lower than the asking price, but all cash. No banks, no delays, no complicated negotiations. For 3 days, Sterling Hospitality didn't respond. Vanessa knew what was happening. They were scrambling, probably trying to find a better offer, but none would come. Then, on the 4th day, her phone rang. Jordan answered, then put the call on speaker for Vanessa. We're willing to negotiate, the voice on the other end said cautiously. It was Richard Langford, the lead negotiator for Sterling Hospitality. Vanessa leaned back in her chair, smiling to herself. Of course they were. She let Jordan do the talking, keeping her identity hidden for now. They went back and forth for another 2 days. Sterling Hospitality pushing for a higher price, Vanessa's team standing firm. Finally, on the 6th day, Langford caved. We'll accept the offer, he sighed. Vanessa finally spoke. Excellent. We'll have the contract signed within 24 hours. There was a pause, And who exactly am I selling to? Vanessa's smile widened. You'll find out soon enough. The next morning, the deal was finalized. The moment the ink dried on the contracts, Vanessa Cole became the new owner of Oakridge Grand. She leaned back in her office chair, holding the ownership documents in her hands. Less than 2 weeks ago, she had been rejected by this very hotel. Now it was hers. But she wasn't buying it for revenge. She was buying it for transformation. She picked up her phone and called Jordan. Let's schedule a staff meeting. I want to introduce myself. Jordan chuckled. Oh, this is going to be fun. Vanessa looked out the window where the hotel stood in the distance. Tomorrow she would walk back through those doors. The morning air was crisp as Vanessa Cole stepped out of her black SUV, her heels clicking against the pavement as she approached the grand entrance of Oakridge Grand. It looked the same as it had the last time she stood there. Tall, imposing, a symbol of exclusivity. But today, everything was different. Today, she owned it. She had deliberately chosen not to announce her arrival beforehand. The employees had no idea their world was about to change. She wanted to see them as they were, not as they would pretend to be when they learned who she was. With quiet confidence, she strode through the golden-lit lobby, taking in the details she had missed the first time. The towering chandeliers, the marble floors, the perfectly arranged floral centerpieces, all designed to exude luxury. But beneath the polished exterior, she could already see signs of the hotel's deeper problems. Several front desk staff members were chatting amongst themselves, barely glancing at guests. A woman in a crisp navy blazer, probably a manager, was whispering to a bellhop, her expression irritated. There was a stiffness to the atmosphere, a sense of hierarchy that didn't welcome guests so much as evaluate them. Her presence went unnoticed for a moment, and she used it to her advantage. She walked up to the front desk. The same receptionist from before, Lisa, was there. Lisa didn't recognize her at first. Welcome to Oakridge Grand, she said, her tone carefully professional. Do you have a reservation? Vanessa smiled slightly. No, but I do have an appointment. There's a staff meeting happening in the conference room, correct? Lisa blinked in surprise. Yes, but that's only for employees. Perfect, Vanessa said smoothly. I'll be heading there now. Lisa frowned. I'm sorry, ma'am, but I can't allow. I promise you, Vanessa said, lowering her voice just slightly. I belong in that meeting. Before Lisa could question her further, Jordan appeared beside her, dressed in his usual sharp suit. Everything's set up, he murmured to Vanessa, then turned to Lisa with a polite but firm smile. She's expected. Lisa hesitated, but with Jordan's confident assurance, she didn't argue. Instead, she gave a small nod, still looking slightly confused as Vanessa walked past her toward the conference room. Inside, the room was filling up. The hotel's staff, from housekeeping to management, were taking their seats around the long mahogany table. At the head of the room stood Mr. Whitmore, the same hotel manager who had dismissed her the night she tried to check in. His arms were crossed, his posture one of quiet authority. He clearly assumed he was leading the meeting. Vanessa walked in and took a seat at the head of the table. His seat. The room quieted. Some employees glanced at each other, confused. Others frowned, trying to place her face. Mr. Whitmore, however, noticed immediately. His eyes narrowed. Excuse me, he said, his voice dripping with impatience. I believe you're in the wrong place. Vanessa met his gaze evenly. I don't believe I am. His lips pressed into a thin line. This is a private meeting for hotel staff. Vanessa smiled. Perfect. Then I'm exactly where I need to be. A murmur rippled through the room. Whitmore's irritation deepened. Who are you? Vanessa leaned back slightly, crossing her legs, letting the silence build for just a moment longer. Then, in a clear, steady voice, she said, I'm Vanessa Cole. As of this morning, I own this hotel. Dead silence. Then, a shift in the air, confusion, shock, disbelief. Whitmore's face paled. What? You heard me, Vanessa said, tilting her head slightly. I bought Oakridge Grand. This is my first official staff meeting. The employees began whispering among themselves. Some looked excited, others nervous. Lisa, who had quietly entered the room, stood frozen in the doorway, her face a mix of horror and realization. Whitmore, however, straightened his shoulders, trying to recover. There must be some mistake. There's no mistake, Jordan interrupted smoothly, stepping forward. He placed a stack of documents on the table, the official proof of the buyout. The deal was finalized yesterday. Ownership transferred this morning. Whitmore glanced at the documents, his mouth opening slightly, then snapping shut. He swallowed hard, clearly struggling to process what was happening. Vanessa let the moment hang before speaking again. "I know this is sudden," she said, her voice calm but commanding. "But change is necessary, and it starts today." She slowly stood, surveying the room, meeting the eyes of every employee. "This hotel has been running on outdated policies and toxic leadership for too long," she continued. "That ends now. From this moment forward, Oakridge Grand will no longer be a place where guests are judged by their appearance, their background, or their last name." She let her gaze settle on Whitmore, "and it will no longer be run by people who believe otherwise." The room went completely silent. Whitmore's expression hardened. "You can't just—" Vanessa held up a hand, stopping him. "You're fired." Gasps rippled through the room. Whitmore's face turned red. "You can't?" "I can," Vanessa said smoothly, "and I just did." For the first time, the other employees looked relieved. Housekeepers exchanged glances. Front desk staff sat up straighter. A few were even smiling. Whitmore looked around as if expecting someone to defend him. No one did. Vanessa nodded to Jordan. "Escort him out." Jordan gestured toward the door. "This way, Mr. Whitmore." Whitmore stiffened, but had no choice. With as much dignity as he could muster, he turned on his heel and marched out of the room. The moment the door shut behind him, Vanessa turned back to the employees. "Now," she said, clasping her hands together, "let's talk about the future of Oakridge Grand." This time, there was no resistance. After the staff meeting, most employees left with a mix of relief and curiosity, whispering about the hotel's new owner and what changes were coming. But Vanessa had one more matter to address before the day ended. Lisa. She spotted the receptionist lingering near the front desk, her usual confident posture replaced with uncertainty. Vanessa walked over, and as soon as Lisa noticed her, she straightened, trying to regain composure. "Miss Cole," Lisa said carefully. Vanessa studied her for a moment. "You remember me now." Lisa swallowed hard. "Yes, ma'am." Vanessa leaned against the desk. "Tell me, Lisa, how often do you turn people away based on how they look?" Lisa's face paled. "I was just following the hotel's policies." "Mr. Whitmore." Vanessa raised a hand, cutting her off. "Whitmore is gone. His policies are gone. Now I'm asking you." Lisa hesitated, then sighed. "More often than I should have." Vanessa appreciated the honesty. "You judged me that night, assumed I didn't belong here." Lisa nodded, unable to meet her gaze. Vanessa let the silence stretch before speaking again. "Everyone makes mistakes. What matters is whether you learn from them." Lisa's eyes snapped up. "Are you firing me?" Vanessa considered her for a moment, then shook her head. "No, I believe in second chances. But things will be different. You'll be retrained, along with the rest of the staff. And if I ever catch you treating a guest unfairly again, there won't be a third chance." "Understood?" Lisa exhaled, nodding quickly. "Understood. Thank you, Miss Cole. I won't let you down." Vanessa gave a small smile. "Good. Now let's make this place better." As she walked away, Lisa stood a little taller, as if given a new start. And that's exactly what Vanessa intended to give everyone, including Oakridge Grand itself.